Hi, welcome to today's Leaders in Mental Wellness and Diabetes, where you will hear insights from the top minds in the world of diabetes care, hosted by Dr. Char.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you, Dr. Fry?
I'm wonderful. I'm good as well.
Great.
Mr. Stephen Thompson comes to us. He helps future physicians make progress on their journey. He is an accomplished business development and sales leader. It sounds as though he helps with computer networking and telecommunications. It sounds like he's from the greater Boston area.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little south of Boston myself, and from New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Thompson, it's wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you for being on this podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much for reaching out and for your willingness to meet and have this discussion today. I'm looking forward to sharing a bit about my journey as a type 1 diabetic and a business owner and
Wonderful.
father, brother, son, cousin.
Oh, that's what we're here for. So being a diabetes warrior, let's just stop right there and jump right in. Almost 30 years, it appears. Oh my goodness. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I was diagnosed in December of 1991, December 6th, 1991. I was married in June of 1991. And, 6 months later, my poor wife is now a spouse of a type 1 diabetic and has to bear some of that burden and literally saved my life and took me to the Joslin Diabetes Center in Boston, Massachusetts, because at the time my primary care wasn't treating me accordingly. And she knew I needed to get help immediately. So she brought me to the Joslin Diabetes Center. And I met Dr. James Rosenzweig in the emergency room. And the man literally saved my life and put me on a really healthy path and let me know what I needed to do to be successful and healthy. Prior to that, I was a healthy 26-year-old man who loved to be outside and play sports and men's basketball and men's hockey and all of that. And, his advice to me was, do not let this disease define you as you move forward on your journey. Do what you do, but be mindful of what's required as a type 1 diabetic. And I've sort of lived that guiding principle that Dr. Rosenzweig had instilled in me early, which set me up for success over the last 30 years. Started with finger sticks and multiple injections per day and sort of guessing and being directionally accurate. To now, where I am a technology-enabled type 1 diabetic. I have a Dexcom G6, I have the Tandem T:slim pump, and I've outsourced a lot of that burden to the technology, which has been fantastic.
Oh, that is amazing. First of all, I hear that you have a supportive system of which we all need and not everybody does. Then
Right.
you were located geographically to where you could get to one of the best diabetes centers in the world. I mean, goodness, that is gratitude, something to grow that as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk about having to adjust to all that. It's been 50 years for me. I was in Germany with a new husband, and I was 16 years old and hadn't graduated high school, but yet got married. That's a whole other podcast. But 50 years ago, it wasn't such a good story. Even 20 years later, it's interesting to hear how they were so advanced. I didn't have a monitor to even take home at that point. They didn't call me type 1. They didn't know to call me. I learned years later, that's when they were just deciding what the name would be. Are you kidding me? I feel like I'm an ancient person now to hear these stories. But really and truly, 20 years advancement to get to you. Isn't that interesting how it changed? And even now, I too have a Dexcom, tells me my blood sugar in the middle of the night, which how many people before us lost their lives in the middle of the night that just merely didn't know what it was. So the Dexcom, I'm a real advocate for them as well. And the pumps have been life-saving. So I guess I do technology more than I realize, but I'm not the greatest at it. It's just that those gadgets, I call them, have saved my life, and I'm sure many others.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's been, it minimizes the burden, right? And to some extent, one of my guiding principles personally is, embrace the burden for the benefit it provides, right? Because I'm a type 1 diabetic, I have to be acutely aware of everything that I'm doing every single day, exercising and moving on a consistent basis, eating a nutrient dense diet, being sort of like mentally tough and aware of my surroundings, but giving myself the room to, get down a little bit, because it is challenging to keep that volume up all day long. The benefit of technology, though, is I used to have an alarm set for 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. so I could finger stick and check my blood sugar through the night, because I was anxious at 10:30 when I would lay down and I would see my blood glucose on a finger stick at 96, trying to figure, okay, am I 96 up, 96 down? Do I have any insulin on board? Should I get downstairs and grab a little snack? Should I, do something different? Like, well, what do I deal with this perfect blood glucose reading? And oftentimes I would lean to the side of, let me go downstairs and have a little bit of a snack and go to bed, and then, wake up at 1 a.m. and my blood sugar is 280.
Gotcha.
So the biggest saver for me with the tech is avoiding hypoglycemic events. That's been the biggest benefit for me, and not having to carry around, my blood glucose meter and my syringes and my bottles. That's been, a lifestyle change for me. And tighter control, better time and range, better A1C. I feel better. At 56 years old, I think I am, more fit than most men my age who are non-diabetics. So, it really has forced me to be responsible and to take action on a consistent basis. And I stick to that with some regularity.
And that in itself puts the positive in our lives where we could otherwise go negative, because it does cause us to be aware. I mean, when you have 200 opportunities to eat a day, and that's what our culture does, it provides. And none of that, or very little of that, is healthy unless we go looking for it.
Correct.
So to be prepared at every moment for a low to hit in a business, in any kind of a work setting, is important, and a job. It's a job. But to have the positive attitude, I honor you for that, to have the attitude of, it's made me better. It's made me better, not bitter. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Like, even just now, before we jumped on, I checked my blood sugar. It was 114, nice steady line overnight. I went to the gym this morning, got my exercise in, but I knew I was going to be meeting with you for 30 or 45 minutes. So I had a half a Larabar just in case. Right? So like, those are the things that non-diabetics don't understand. They think we take an injection and off we go. There are so many considerations. Before I get in the car or go for a ride, check your blood sugar. What's it at? I'm jumping into a meeting for an hour and a half. I let attendees know I'm a type 1 diabetic, by the way. If I'm looking at something, it's not my phone. It's my pump, so I can see what my blood glucose reading is. I may eat something while I'm on this meeting with you for 45 minutes or an hour and a half, but I let people know I'm very open about my diabetes. I wear my Dexcom on my arm. I love when people ask what that is. I'm completely available about it and transparent. To some extent, it's like a badge of honor that I wear this Dexcom on my arm and allow people to say, hey, what's that? And it opens up really interesting conversations.
Well, for me, because of, I guess, the time frame, but there was some embarrassment. There was some, not shame. I never had shame, but because of everything around me, as if I was wanting attention. That's what I felt like sometimes, that people thought I wanted attention for it. And so one day, just randomly, I read a story where a mother said, I will not take my 8-year-old to a dirty bathroom and inject him. I will not ever do that. And I squared my shoulders, and I've been on a pump and off a pump for different reasons on my, so as you know, type 1, if we're off a pump, we're going to take multiple injections, whether it's 3 units or whether it's like type 2s take a full dose, but we still take a lot of injections. And during those times when I'm off a pump, you better well believe now I discreetly do it. I can do it under the table, but if you want to see it, you certainly can. And I am not going to another dirty bathroom. I made that decision based on that, Mama,
Right.
and I don't go to a dirty bathroom. And so now, there was a reason I wore my pump on the outside of my belt, because as a girl, I didn't want that thickness to look like it was in my belly, and I had enough. I didn't want that. And someone asked me, why are you showing that? And so there were those kind of things early on. And then I had a friend whose dad had to go to the state capitol and fight for a pump for her because insurance had refused. Back when, there's just so many things that
Sure.
we are informing people today how it's changed and how it's even getting better. And so I'm grateful for a Dexcom. When I see a Dexcom on somebody's arm, I almost feel like a family member. It's like there's a bond. But
there absolutely is. Yeah, I've approached many folks that I've seen on the beach or around and about, or just give a shout as I'm walking on the beach. We live 20 minutes from the beach. Hey, Dexcom, hey, how you doing? And we just keep going.
That's right. There's just this.
It's like a Jeep owner, right? They wave to each other when they drive by, right? So.
It's right. And it's, there was a time when we couldn't get any information. It seemed though we got it when we were first diagnosed and we were overwhelmed with it. And then that's all we could get. Now we're so inundated. We're grateful, but there's so much that's not helpful. And so that's why these podcasts, I like having the professionals that know their arena and the professionals that are type 1s and even type 2s that have been the journey, been the course, and can give good information. Now, does diabetes and or the anxiety that goes along with the things we've already discussed, does it impact your work at all? How do you've told us a little bit, but is there anything in particular that is trying or taxing that you could advise just by what you do and how you handle it when it comes to work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't want to sound like a superhero here or that I'm extraordinary in my efforts to be, a type 1 diabetic without impact emotionally. But, 30 years in, and in the early years, it was challenging, right? 8 injections a day, checking your fingers 15 times a day and hoping that you're directionally accurate. And there was some anxiety around that. I just get up and do it. It's part of who I am. It's been the 5th member of our family for 30 years, right? And I just go along with it. So right now I have a sales coaching and consulting business. I'm doing business development work for an organization out of Cambridge that provides virtual guidance for students that are interested in becoming physicians. Most of my work now, because of COVID, is in my room, in my office here. So I do all of my work via Zoom. So I have my food, I have my glucose, I have my emergency kit, I have my supplies. So I'm surrounded by my support system. When I was traveling into Boston or traveling on planes, there was extra considerations for what I needed to do. I'm traveling this weekend and I'm getting a little bit anxious about, making sure I pack everything, 2 Dexcoms, 2 bottles of insulin, my backup Medtronic pump and all of the hardware for that, my change sets times 5, even though I'm going away for 4 days, just to make sure that I have it all with me in case something goes awry. So I do feel a little bit of anxiety around when I get out of my comfort zone, but then once I'm in that zone, it just kind of works itself out. But I recognize sometimes the anxiety does come up. Typically, it's when I'm experiencing a hypoglycemic event and I have something else going on where I can't just sit down and take the time out and take care of it. I'll get a little bit anxious around a hypo event.
Well, that is so important, I think, to have somebody who has managed well that they have to manage. And we don't have to have anxiety. And I think it's important for the viewers to know you don't have to live in this with anxiety, but there's very few that live where you live for 30 years that can honestly say, I have learned to manage the diabetes without having to live in an anxious life. Because if you're living in that anxious side, it may be that you didn't prepare enough, and it sounds like you prepare very well. And then you know what to do when it goes either direction. And so it makes a calm come over us. But we were created, I'm sure you know, but we were created with a fight or flight system. So when we start low, or when we are anxious about, they've just stopped me in this dang airport, I've got to have my stuff. Where's it at? Anytime those things happen, we are expected to have emergencies, and we're expected to have circumstances that we are totally out of control of.
Right.
But once we are equipped to handle that emergency, but when that emergency is over, it's our privilege, obligation, and responsibility to stop the stress, because now there's no lion chasing us.
Right.
It's over. So now I think the one thing in mental health that I've done, seeing patients regularly, is work on the how-to of when the emergency's over. And with type 1s, here's my challenge. Once I've had a low, doesn't it ever make you grumpy? Or doesn't it make somebody around you seem irritable? They may not be different. It may be me. But once I am grumpy, now my family has taken the high road. And if I seem low because I'm extra quiet, or if I seem low, I'm thinking because I'm grumpy, I'm not sure what, but they've taken the high road, and they will say to me, either my son or my husband will say, "What's your blood sugar?"
Right.
And I'll hold my phone up, but that's a cue to me. And as soon, if it's low, then we handle it. Because sometimes mine's low and I haven't a clue. And so once I've handled that low and I see a normal number, there's no forgetting now that it's my job, my responsibility to change my mood so that I don't walk in any of that. And of course, I have a whole method of how I teach people how to reverse anxiety. But diabetes is that first journey of where I knew what anxiety was. You are a testament to the fact that if we live healthy, we use what's there for us. My endocrinologist looked in his mama's eyes at the age of 7 or 12, whatever age he was diagnosed, and the sadness on her face, because he's my age, and it was bleak. It wasn't a good doctor story to us. And he decided, I'm not going to have my mother's sad eyes. And so today he's helped more people in Tennessee than any endocrinologist. And he's been named the best one in Tennessee 3 different times.
That's
so
fantastic.
I know we can do it. And I know it's not a death sentence. And I know it's nothing for us not to have compassion for, of course, us. But when it comes to anxiety and some of those things, emotions are great followers. They're not good leaders. Right. So we have to be the boss of them. Do you agree or disagree with that? And do you think that really is the pathway that maybe kept you from experiencing mental illness because of it?
I think so. And I believe I was fortunate to live 25 years and 11 months as a non-type 1 diabetic, right? So I was an athlete as a child and through high school, football, basketball, baseball,
you didn't have it to deal
men's
with.
league hockey and men's league basketball. I'm active, I'm competitive. And I just look at this as another foe to some extent that I get to match wits with on a daily basis. And sometimes I talk to it, sometimes I challenge it. When I'm at the gym and I grab the battle ropes, that the battle ropes are diabetes, and I get to toss it around for 30-second increments. So I look at it that way, and that maybe that's not for everyone, but that's sort of what works for me, right? I just say, okay, bring it on. I've got you, and we're going to get through this day. Now, not every day is perfect. I'm not undefeated, but I've got a winning percentage that's in accordance with what I believe is success as I march down this path of continuance to be a type 1 diabetic.
My goodness, that is totally, totally amazing. So knowing that when I was coming on here, and you're not a physician, you're not an endocrinologist, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, he's in networking and telecommunications. Maybe I can connect that with this podcast. But the truth is, you have been such an example for anybody who has a career that you have to inform those around you. It's not about the diabetes.
Right.
And you have to inform those. You have to keep them as on your team as knowing and not let it overwhelm them in the process of what you do. Now,
Correct.
that is
Well said.
amazing. So it's a perfect connection for this podcast. So now, how does Sales 10 coaching help sales organizations unleash excellence within med schools? When I read that, that's what I'm like, how do I connect that with diabetes? Well, it's how do you, as a type 1, tell us what that actually is and what you do on a college level for guys and gals that want to be doctors.
Yeah, so two different things. I have my sales coaching consulting business that I've been running for a number of years. I work with sales organizations to deliver excellence throughout their org. So I work with sales leaders and managers and individual contributors to help them practice, because absent rehearsal, salespeople are doomed to fail. So I am their sales coach, and I work with them in role simulation situations to practice how they go about their craft in the marketplace to sell products. I also work with an organization called Med School Coach. We provide virtual admissions advising services and tutoring services for future physicians. So high schoolers and undergrads who are interested in a career in medicine, we help them with a set of services. So I have two different roles here that I do. But fundamentally, it's the framework of what I've done to manage my diabetes that I apply to what I do in business. So set the frame and then have a process on top of that frame that results in desired outcomes that are favorable for the businesses and those that participate. So that's how I approach my diabetes as well, right? I have a framework, all my gadgets and gear and my mindset. And then the process is, my daily interaction with it and how I am adjusting my strategy for that particular situation that diabetes brings to me. So there's significant overlap on my approach to business and my approach to my care, because as a diabetic, we're caretakers and we're sufferers. We have a dual role, right? So I'm caretaking for a type 1 diabetic, and I'm also a sufferer of a chronic disease as well. So that dual role can be challenging for a lot of people. I tend to decouple that and allow the sufferer to go through some challenges, but the caretaker has rigor and discipline about what we need to do right now because you're about to jump into a meeting. So that's been my approach, is what's the framework that will give me best results? And then what's my process and how can I be, fluid in that process? So in the days of the Garmin, right, you plugged in your coordinates and it sent you on a linear path. But Waze, you put your coordinates in and it gave you a fluid path. So I take sort of a Waze-like approach to my daily journey to arrive at a satisfactory destination, which allows me to be flexible in the daily activities to get where I need to be at end of day.
That is so good. That really is good. And so on the one side, endocrinologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, dietitians that are doing business outside the framework of traditional medicine now, all these independent businesses could benefit by a coach possibly that would help with the framework and the processes in order to appropriately or maybe sufficiently or get them ready for monetizing, because they're going to have to sell. We have to sell sometime or the other. So people keep telling me you're going to have to sell if you're going to do this for very long. So that's what you do. And that's how you could help my community.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Matter of fact, it's interesting that, I managed my diabetes in a silo for so long, right? I went to my endocrinologist, She's fantastic. She's been extraordinarily good to me, really leans in and spends a lot of time with me. We have a really strong relationship for the last 15 years. She has propelled me and empowered me to be really successful, right? So I have a really strong support system around me that enables me to have these desired outcomes that I need to recognize, and at the same time, avoiding negative consequence, right? So what is my plan for a desired outcome that meets what I define as my criteria as success? And then how do I mitigate risk on the downside of negative consequence? And there's lots of negative consequence to being a diabetic, right? If you don't take good care of yourself. But the social media community, my original point was in a silo, but the social media community now that I've touched in the last 2 years has just opened up the doors for other folks that are going through this and, with the same challenges. And I've, met some extraordinary people through social media. Matter of fact, I have a 2:00 Zoom call with a woman who reached out to me 4 or 5 months ago and said, hey, I followed some of your posts. I used to work out quite a bit. I was diagnosed with diabetes. Can you give me some help? And she and I have been talking every couple of weeks for the last 6 or 7 weeks. We have a Zoom call today at 2:00 just to connect, because she sent me a note and said, hey, I'm experiencing some anxiety. Do you have time? Sure, let's meet tomorrow at 2. So the community is really important. So social media, for all of the downside that it brings to society, there are some really positive attributes to connecting with people. And I would recommend that diabetics should find their tribe. If you're a elite athlete, there are plenty of folks you can find who are elite athletes on social media. If you're trying to just get to steady state, there are plenty of folks that can do that. Need help with diet, exercise, mindset, methodology, approach. There are resources available. And I don't have much of a following. I don't follow many. I'm not really looking to do that, but I love the community that I've connected with on social media, particularly Instagram. It seems to be very positive, the folks that I've engaged with.
And tell me where you're at on Instagram. What's your handle? Is that what it's called, a handle?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's T1D Warrior 65, which is my birth year.
Okay. And then as we wind up here, what about for a business? What about for a professional that wants to do this online, wants to do a business, wants to be not in the traditional realm, what they've done maybe for many years, but now they want to be online. They want to monetize product or see patients online. They want to grow an online business, of which before COVID, that's another whole topic. Before COVID, we in mental health did very little online. And now I could have 3 private practices. I just have a little bit because I'm trying to do this online, but so I've downsized, not up, but I think I could have 3 full practices. Everybody, I could, my husband goes around the world twice a week, because 2 days a week, because we can now. And so what would you tell, or give me an address or something where they could easily find you? Because if 1/3 of the people that I know that do helps for others in some kind of medical or mental health way,
right?
If 1/3 knows as much as I do about what to do next, they could use you, right?
Yeah, that'd be great. It is interesting because I have this brand T1D Mentor that I've kind of played around with, bringing that to market just to help people. Fundamentally what I do in my role at work or personally or with my outreach is I help people make progress on their journey, right? I don't sell anything. I don't provide products. I just help people make progress, right? And that's important for both the business community and for the diabetes community, right? I don't show up and sell you anything, right? If you have a demand, if you have a struggling moment, if you have a current state that's no longer tolerable and you need a desired state that you can be successful in, and the magnetism and draw of what I do provides you an opportunity to engage with me, that's where I find people. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn under Stephen Thompson with a PH. And then I have my sales10coaching.com website that I have for, client engagement for my
coaching. Okay. Well, I just want them to be able to go find you easily because I believe not just for the individual client. Now I was trying to I've never heard of a coach for physicians in college, going to college. I've not heard of a coach. So I was so interested in knowing about that. But it also just connects. What's so intriguing is everything about your connects in such a way that there's one model. There's one model, there's one methodology, there's one outcome, and that is success. And there's beneath all that framework of that model, there's room for all of these things that might happen that as a diabetes patient, you couldn't avoid in your business approach. So I'm sure there's pieces in there in the processes that you make room for people that you help for when we do it the wrong way or circumstances come that we can't anticipate, just like as if it were a hypo episode. So it's interesting to me and that you do it in a one frame, that it connects all those. So I don't know how my team found you, but I'm so glad they did, because it absolutely encourages me to make mine better as one, because for years I thought my world was separate and I kept it hid. I kept it hidden, and keeping it hidden helped no one. Help no one. And while I'm not a victim, I'm also type 1, and I've been for all of my adult life and part of my childhood. You know, it feels like part of my childhood. I was married, I was 16, but every bit of my adult life, I only knew I wasn't fully grown 2 years later, you know. But
yeah, it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary community. The support is amazing. You know, folks that have been type 1 diabetics for 50 years, you know, I think about the parents, 50 years ago, and what they were going through and what that meant to them, and, you know, information and accessibility and technology didn't exist. It was insulin needed to be refrigerated. There were syringes that needed to be boiled and sharpened, and then no blood glucose meter at home to check. You had maybe you had a urine stick. You could go and be directionally accurate to some extent on what the snapshot was at that time. I couldn't imagine, as hard as it is, and as much of a burden as it's been being a caretaker and a sufferer, I'm not sure I would have been well equipped to be a caretaker for my child who was type 1 diabetic, right? That is an incredible burden for parents. And I see lots of parents whose children are, 6 months old, a year old, 3 years old, that are being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And my heart goes out to those folks. But what I want to say to them is leverage the technology, leverage the community, right? Be laser focused on your child's care. But you need to be mom and dad first and caretaker at the same time. Don't become the caretaker and mom disappears and dad disappears in the background, right? And I see a lot of people in the community, they lose sight of the fact that they're mom and dad first and caretaker right alongside, but don't lose the mom and dad to the caretaker. It can be challenging.
That is correct. Seeing patients of type 1, when I see children, I don't know the percentage, but it's a high percentage of more work done with the parents,
right?
Especially moms,
right? Exactly.
Where it relates to anxiety and problem solving, to how they handle it, so there's not friction and conflict between the patient and the parent. So there's so much they have to deal with. My grandmother, having no idea when I was 10 years old that I was going to be, because, you really, science has proven you get to be having diabetes way before you're diagnosed. So who knows what was happening when I was 10. But when I was 10 years old, I remember seeing my grandmother, I'm guessing at that age, but about that time, I remember seeing my grandmother try her best, do what was told her. And she would sit down at night and eat 1 stick of graham cracker and 1/2 cup of milk, just a little tiny juice glass of milk. I look back now, she thought she was doing everything right. She didn't know, they didn't know.
Right.
And now she left this world way early. My daddy's biological family, he was adopted. His biological family, we soon learned, aunts, grandmother, everybody died at a very young age. You know why? And they were all diabetes patients.
Sure.
And we didn't know. They didn't know, I should say. They didn't have the care. They
Right.
didn't know what to do. We are so fortunate.
Yes.
And so I tell myself today, would you drink motor oil if it tasted good? You know better. It's choices that is responsible choices that sometimes, while I am trying really hard to be good to me, and it seems as though you're gentle with yourself and with others about it, sometimes I take a hardcore stand.
Right.
And sometimes I might do that too much, but if I didn't, I would let myself go too much. So it's you're too late to tell me that I'm not being good at it, even though I've been far from perfect. But where I used to see all the places I failed, and there was no way, no matter how good I tried, I could find some way I had messed up that day when it came to taking care of my diabetes. Hey, it's been almost 49 years later. You can't tell me I've not done well. I'm success proof. I have good feet. I have no tingling in my fingers.
Right.
I am healthy and success. That's what I call it. I call it
Incredible.
success. I call you a success and an enthusiast and a supporter and an encourager, but an example for us all.
Well, thank you very much. And you as well. You know, it's interesting. If you look at the magnitude of what you've accomplished in your life, 18,000 plus consecutive days as a type 1 diabetic and no days off. 18,000. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. When people have a prescription that they take twice a day for 10 days, they roll their eye. Oh my God, 10-day prescription. It's like, yeah, I'm at day 10,887 or something. You're at day 18,000 of doing much more than twice a day, prescription. So kudos to you for doing that and for being successful and for allowing me to join you today on this important discussion. I'm honored to be here. It was great to meet you and to share, my perspective and some of my thoughts.
Well, it's been incredible. And not only do I think that the patients listening will benefit from it, but I think every specialist that is trying a new adventure, maybe at making this work for patients, should look you up and
that'd be great.
Listen more than listen to this podcast, but look you up and start following you and just see how that you could help more of our community than ever. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Let's stay in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.